Go live. Hello, I'm Darryl Learie, and this is about generalized anxiety and depression. Oh God, the dog is barking downstairs. Fuck. Anyways, I know people are gonna watch the replay, so I'm gonna start talking, even though there's no viewers right now. Talking about this is one of the scariest things I can ever imagine doing, because I suffer from generalized anxiety and depression. Chronic depression, actually. And the truth is, I don't work because I live on disability. You see, this is hard. See, I'm unable to what's the word? Conform to a routine. Like, for example, to keep a job, for example, you have to be able to mentally conform to a routine. You know, in other words, you have to be at work every day at 9 a.m. and then get off work at 5 p.m. or 6 or whatever the case is. And I can do that for a few days in a stretch, but I can't do it in the long term. See, the thing is, imagine your biggest fear is like a fear of heights. That's like your biggest fear ever. And because of that fear, there's certain things you will not do. You know, maybe it's travel on an airplane or go on a roller coaster, you know, would be a good example. You know, or go up on something that's very high and there's nothing to tether you. You're just freestanding on something that's way up there and you've got this immense fear of heights and you have a knee-jerk reaction to this fear of heights. And it's like, no matter what, you're not going up there. Well, that's what working would be like for me. It would be like if I had this immense fear of heights and my job was to go onto a roller coaster for 8 days a week, 8 hours a day, every day of the week. That's the type of anxiety that I would be experiencing continually. And for the short term, for the very short term, you know, I can act like my generalized anxiety and chronic depression aren't variables in my behavior and how I react to things. But certain things cause me so much anxiety that sometimes I have an unconscious reaction to them. It's like, say you had this innate fear of things exploding. You know, say you follow all the news about terrorism all the time and you have it in the back of your mind, this fear of things exploding, and your job was to defuse bombs. You know, you would have this like instant knee-jerk reaction, like there's no way in hell I'm even touching that. You know, which would render you incompetent, you know, in that regard. And generalized anxiety means that there's a whole spectrum of elements that can trigger your anxiety. So it's not isolated, for example, to social anxiety, for example, where that is a main focus of fear of people, for example. You know, people with social anxiety, usually they can function well if they're not surrounded by a group of strangers or in a crowd or, you know, this type of thing. But generalized anxiety expands beyond that. So if I'm working at a job, for example, um, I don't just experience the social anxiety part of it, of like whether will my coworkers like me or not, will they start making fun of me, um, will I become part of workplace bullying, this type of thing, and will it get worse, you know, it also ties into, will I be able to reach the quota of the day? Will I be able to competently do the tasks that are demanded of me? Will I screw up? What happens if I do something and I don't know how to do it and I can't receive instruction from somebody? What if something out of my control happens? It's all these different variables that are affecting my anxious state. And this affects me in my day-to-day life, because just because I don't work doesn't mean that when I go home, that when I'm home for most of my time, that my pathology of anxiety doesn't follow me home. I mean, here at home, there's many things that contribute to my anxiety. For example, if I'm walking to the mall by myself, I have this inner fear that somebody's going to try to mug me, or someone's going to I'm going to be a victim of an aggravated assault. That a whole group of people will converge onto me and attack me, and there'll be so many people that I won't have. There won't be anything I can do about it. It's when I work out, because I try to work out because my psychiatrist told me that working out is good for my mental health. I used to go on the treadmill for an entire hour, but now I only go on the treadmill for half an hour, because I would get anxieties about my expectations of myself, and I would get anxieties about, would I, about the physical stresses that I would put on myself and how that would feel over the time of an hour, so I've found it much more manageable, to go onto the treadmill for like half an hour versus like an entire hour. Everybody feels anxiety from time to time, mostly like stress related anxiety, so for example, like to best compare it, there's just a part of my brain, there's a part of my my brain circuitry, the anxiety circuits in my brain that are just unregulated. They just go wild. They misunderstand and miscalculate actual dangers in my environment. So, for example, if I talk to a few strangers, which wouldn't be anxiety arousing for most people, by comparison, it's as if you were performing in front of like millions of people and you didn't have a routine, and millions of people are just waiting on you to do something to entertain them, and you're just standing there and you're thinking all these thoughts. Well, this is the same intensity that I would be feeling if I'm just talking to a few strangers. It's that intense. There's a lot of judgment, a lot of negative judgment that's pressed onto me, especially like when people find out I don't work and this type of thing, and they come up with these ideas in their head of what I must be like. They try to personify me in these negative ways, like, oh, that guy's lucky, he must just sit at home and smoke pot all day and play video games and party all the time. And it's like, no, that's not my life at all. You know, the thing is that a lot of time at home I spend alone. I've actually only have one friend, just one friend, and unfortunately he suffers from chronic depression, which is also something that I also suffer from too. So I don't get to see a lot of him. Days will go by without hearing a word from him. You know, most of the relationships that I maintain are like online relationships with people I'll never see or never meet. And for me, it's quite lonely because I have this huge fear of making friends. You know, because I am so scared of that judgment. You know, there's many times I've spent hours in my bathroom crying to myself, you know, because the pain, the gravity of those judgments is just felt so personally, you know, accompanied with guilt, you know, because no matter how hard I try, I still have limitations of what I can realistically do. My life is actually a very lonely life. You know, I spend a lot of time thinking to myself and spending a lot of time with myself, and I'm constantly trying to pull myself out of any depression that may overwhelm me by trying to continuously involve myself in personal projects and involve myself in my dancing and in my working out, and I try very hard to make myself continually do things to establish some kind of routine that will eventually pay off at a future date, you know. Like maybe I become more fitter and healthier, maybe I become a better dancer, you know, something that's attached to a reward while trying to push away any impending depression that might come my way. That's something I work really hard on. And you know, it's just really hard. I can't, I don't have as much control over how I feel and some of my reactive behaviors. You know, sometimes I'll get scared of things that wouldn't scare other people, and my reaction is just to stay away from it, stay far away from it. You know, but I face, you know, I face these negative, dark emotions that govern a lot of my, you know, avoidance to the real world, with a sober mind. You know, I don't try to remedy myself with alcohol or drugs or this type of thing, you know. And in this sense, I feel like I'm being truer to myself and dealing with the experience of it more appropriately, rather than trying to drown my darker feelings about how I'm feeling and this type of thing. See, I figured it would be worthwhile to talk about why there's people like me, you know, in this world that behave the same way that people like me behave. You know, because people don't know unless they know that that story behind that person and what that person personally struggles with. And I figured, you know, sharing this experiential knowledge could have some value to it, because there are other people like me. I've spent a long time trying to search out other people like me. And I had found out that there was a woman on Periscope that suffered from social anxiety, and because of that she didn't work. And it was like, oh my God, I found someone that's almost like me in that sense. I'm not some kind of like freak of nature that just constantly makes the wrong decisions and just can't get his act together, you know. And unfortunately, you know, it involves a lot of self-blame. I suppose in one way or another, you know, I mean, people may judge me for the worst, but I'm the one that replays those judgments in my head over and over and over again. So in that way, I would be my harshest critic, you know. But, you know, it's... I mean, it just ties in a lot to a person's emotional well-being. And I guess if there was anything I wanted more, to have more than anything in my life, it would be to have friends. That is the number one thing I would want most in my life, is to have friends. You know, I mean, I don't have a criminal record, you know. I'm not actively hurting people out there, you know. It wasn't even my choice to go into disability, you know. It was actually my mother that pushed me into it. You know, she pushed me to pursue these doctors, and I had been evaluated by dozens of like neurologists and counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists, and it was a very long process until, you know, I was finally approved for disability. So even that wasn't my choice, you know. It wasn't like when I was a kid, I was like, I dream of being on disability, you know, like that's like my all-time dream. No, it wasn't like that. You know, I mean, I've done dozens of assessments, gone through dozens of treatments, and so, you know, and it's hard. Like, I don't have a relationship with my father at all. That's completely non-existent. You know, he has. I don't speak to my father at all. Actually, truth is, I'm too scared to talk to him because he's completely written me off. You know, the time I met him after 30 years of him not being in my life, from the time I was 6 months old to the time I was like in my later 30s, you know, it was just all these harsh judgments and criticisms and these things still, you know, echo through my head, and my life isn't easy. You know, I've got a wife that also lives on disability, you know, she has lung problems and she has like really crippling arthritis, and she's been in the hospital a number of times, and, you know, I try very hard to make her life worthwhile and contribute to her life. So it's not an easy dynamic. Anyways, I hope that brings some clarity to generalized anxiety for that part. You know, maybe next time I'll include more on the depression part that I suffer. You know, that's the depression that I constantly experience. Is very hard to deal with. That's where I constantly criticize myself and ask myself the most profound questions, and it usually results in just feeling that much worse about myself and about my life and this type of thing. But I'm going to end it here, and this is my contribution to a small part of society, and I hope it becomes helpful for someone else. I'm Darryl Learie. Thank you.